Welcome back on Dynamo. Today I want to propose you a video about
the rules of the Codex Space Marine 2020 because it's really quite full of rules. I decided to create different videos with a focus each one on a different set of videos, and you can find everything about such rules in the playlist in the description, so not worry about this, and remember that you can find everything there. So now we can start seeing the rules related about the chapter tactics. I want to remember you that there are two types of chapter tactics: the main chapter tactics and the successors ones. The main ones are really good and are like they are, so you can't change them. The successors ones, you can combine two different chapter tactics together and use them as you like, so it's quite different. The advantage of the ones that are from the main chapter is that you have the supplements, so you have more units and so on that you can use, but they are fixed, so there are some restrictions. Sometimes there are some things that you can't use or you have to use, so you have to pay attention which one is the strategy that you want to apply. So not mind if you want a successor one or a main one, you have to have fun, but choose attentively which one is suit and fit better to your style of game and army. So now we can start to see them. And we can begin from the main chapter tactics, and the first one that we can see is the Dark Angels with Grim Resolve. The abilities of these chapter tactics is that each time a model with this tactic makes an attack, unless that model's unit has moved this turn, excluding the pile-in or the consolidation moves, add 1 to the attack hit rolls. It means that it works both in shooting and melee, so it's really quite amazing. Okay, so when you charge, you can't use such tactic, okay? But remember that when shooting can be really quite amazing because it means improving the hit roll from all your units that are shooting if you haven't moved them. So quite an amazing one. Moreover, each time a combat attrition test is taken for a unit with this tactic, it is automatically passed. So crazy one. It means that you can at maximum lose one model because you failed the moral test, but you can't lose any other from the combat attrition. Really quite good. And then we had the West cards with Lightning Assault. That makes that the units with this tactic can declare a charge in the turn in which they advance or fall back. So it means that they can move, for example for the Moto, they can move, they can add, in the case of the Moto, add the 6 of the advance automatically and then charge, so a really great amount of movement to reach the enemy. And in the case that they fall back, they can fall back, make another unit fire to the unit that they were in close combat with, and then charge back to that unit or charge another one. Amazing. And more, the models with this tactic does not suffer penalty occurred for the hit roll for firing with assault weapons in the turn in which they advanced. So it means that they can move advancing, then fire without any penalty with the assault weapons, but it's that they can do, and then even charge, so they can do everything: movement, shooting, charging, killing. Really quite crazy and amazing one. And then we had the Spurs Walls with Hunters Unleashed. These are quite interesting. Each time a model with these tactics make a melee attack, if that model's unit make a charge move, was charged or performed an heroic intervention this turn, add 1 to that attack hit roll. And I want to remember you that the Space Marines has also the Shock Assault, so they have also one more attack to add in this situation, so quite interesting. Moreover, units with this tactic are eligible to perform heroic intervention as if they were charters. So it means that other than saving the command points that are needed to use a stratagem that makes the same, all your units are available to go to close combat. So, or the opponent make that make an engagement of all the units that are near, or you can amass all the units against the opponent eventually. So quite really interesting if you want to bring close combat to your opponent, because if it comes close, you really smash it. So quite interesting. And then we had the Imperial Fists with Siege Masters. The first part is that each time a model with this static makes a ranged attack, the target does not receive benefit of light cover against that attack. It can be useful, but it depends a lot by if the opponent has a light cover or not, so otherwise it's useless, but it can be useful. But what is useful is that each time a mod with this static makes an attack with a bolt weapon, so all the weapons with the bolt part in the name, and a modified hit roll of 6 score 1 additional hit, so it's really quite interesting. Moreover, if you are able to make the rerolling of missing hits, because it means that you can even make more hits than you would have been allowed, so it can be quite interesting. It's not so great, but really quite interesting. And then we have Crimson Fist with no matter the odds, that make that each time a model with the tactics make a ranged attack against a unit that contained at least 5 more models than the attacker units when it was selected to shoot, add 1 to the attack's hit roll. So it means that it's better to make small units with the Crimson Fist to be able to use such tactic. And for the purposes of this tactic, vehicles models each count as 5 model. And sincerely, I don't find so good this part, because it means that you can't never apply against vehicles, because it's always that you have no option to do this on the vehicles, because you have to have more than 5 models than yours, but if you have at least one, it means that the opponent has to have at least 6 models to be able to gain such bonus, so it's not so good this part. And each time a model with this static makes an attack with bolt weapons and a modified hit roll of 6, score 1 unit. And if you think that you have yet seen something like this, it's because it's the second part of the Imperial Fist, because the Crimson Fist are technically a successor chapter of the Imperial Fist themselves. And then we had the Black Templars with Righteous Zeal, that let you reroll advanced roll and charge rolls made for unit with this static, really not bad. And each time a mod with this static would draw a wound as a result of a mortal wound, roll a d6 and on a 5+, that wound is not lost. Remember, only mortal wound. It's technically like having all your models under the continuous priest, the chaplain, that goes to use the litanies of fate on all the army. Really quite interesting if you were interested in such effect. Still, remember that the Black Templars can't use librarians anyway. And then there are my favorite one, that there are the Blood Angels with Red First, that let you add 1 to advanced rolls and charge rolls made for units with this static, and each time a mod with this static makes a melee weapon, if that modest unit made a charge move, was charged or performed an heroic intervention this turn, add 1 to that attack's wound roll. So really quite amazing these ones, because it means that you can combine with the shock asset one, and even Echoes of Savage, that it's from the facts of the Codex of Blood Angels, because the Codex of Blood Angels is not more usable. But remember that it means that you can, when you do an assault or perform an heroic intervention or you are under charge, you make 1 or 2 more attacks, you make that you have a wound roll improved of 1, so it means that if you are going to wound on a 6, you wound on a 5, from a 5 to a 4, and so on. So quite good, and they are really quite interesting. You only need to improve your way to hit and the amount of attacks that you can do. Really quite amazing as a chapter, but I like them, so okay. And then we had the flesh tearers with Fury Within. I want to remind you that the flesh tearers are a successor chapter of the Blood Angels. And each time a mod with this tactic makes a melee attack, if that mod's unit made a charge move, was charged or performed a heroic intervention this turn, add 1 to that attack's wound roll, so as we've seen before for the Blood Angels. And on a modified wound roll of 6, improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. This is cumulative with the bonus from Assault Doctrine if it is active from your army. This has been changed because before it was not such, but it's really quite good because means that your weapons are having, if you are able to do these 6, the shock assault also when it's not active, the doctrine, and if there is, you have an improvement, so really not bad. And in some way you can choose if you want to play the Blood Angels or the Flesh Tearers to have similar bonuses, but sincerely they are really quite amazing and I love the background of the Flesh Tearers too. And then we had the Iron Hands with The Flesh is Weak. That makes that each time a model with this static will lose a wound, roll a d6 on a 6, that wound is not lost, and it applies to both normal and mortal wounds, because it counts the wound that is lost. And it's like having an apothecary always around you for all your models. Really quite amazing. Moreover, models with these static wounds characteristics can change as they suffer damage, are considered to have double the number of wounds remaining for the purpose of determining what their characteristics are. So it means that it's mainly about vehicles, because they see with the decreasing of wounds a decreasing of their statistics, and so it can be quite interesting if you are planning to use a lot of vehicles. And then we've had the Ultramarines with the Codex Discipline that let you add 1 to the leadership characteristic of models with this tactic. That can be useful as not, up to you, but it's useful in the moral test eventually. And units with these tactics are eligible to shoot in a turn in which they fell back, but if they do, they have a penalty of 1 in the ranged attacks once. So it's quite interesting because it means that even if you are engaged, you can fall back and still shooting even if with a penalty. So it can be quite interesting. And then we had the Salamanders with Forged in Battle that let you each time a unit with this stat is selected to shoot or fight, you can reroll 1 wound roll when resolving that unit's attacks. Only 1, but if you add some rerollings, can be useful to have another roll to make do the work, so it can be useful. And each time an attack with an armor penetration characteristic of 1 is allocated to a model with this tactic, that attack has an armor penetration characteristic of 0 instead. Remember that it's not a bonus on all, so a -2 doesn't become a -1, only the -1 becomes like 0. Anyway, it's still good because a large majority of weapons are having an armor penetration of 0 or -1, so it's quite interesting as one to save your models. And then we had the Raven Guard with Shadow Masters that let you each time a ranged attack is made against a unit with this tactic, if the attacker is more than 18 inches away, then the unit with this tactic is treated like having the benefit of light cover against that attack. It means that you can use such one even in open field, even if 18 inches it's quite a lot, so it's something to take note about. Moreover, each time a ranged attack is made against an infantry unit with this tactic that is entirely on or within a terrain feature, if the attack is more than 12 inches away, then the unit with this tactic is treated like having the benefit of dense cover against that attack. That can be quite useful because remember that these two parts can be combined, so within 12 inches if you are within or inside the terrain feature, you can have the bonus of leg cover and desk cover, so can be quite good because you anyway add the ones about the terrain feature that you are inside, so can be quite interesting, even if, remember, there are some ranges to take note. And then we had the Deathwatch with Xenos Hunters that let you make that each time a model with this static makes a melee attack against keywords models enemy with Tyranids, Eldari, Orcs, Necrons and Taus units, reroll a hit rolls of 1. So this is perfectly as a preferred enemy against the Xenos races. And after both sides have finished deploying their armies, selected one battlefield roll. Until the end of the battle, each time a model with this static makes an attack against an enemy unit with that battlefield roll, reroll the wound rolls of 1. This is quite interesting because you know that it works on everyone, not only the Xenos races. But what is more interesting is that if you are able to understand the main rules of your opponent army, you can really have a bonus without having auras or characters on that gives you a bonus. So you can gain quite a lot anyway, so it can be quite interesting. And then we can move on the successor tactics. Remember that other than states, you can choose every combination of 2 of such ones. And the first one that we can see is bolter fusillades that make you that each time a model with this tactic make a ranged attack with a bolt weapon, reroll a hit roll of 1. This is one of the best because the main weapons of the Space Marines are related about being bolt weapons, so really quite interesting. Then we have Born Heroes that make that each time a model with this static makes a melee attack, if that model units make a charge move this turn, add 1 to the attack's hit roll. It's not so good, it's not so bad, it depends a lot on what things you associate to such thing. Anyway, can be interesting. And then we had duelists that say that each time a model with this static makes a melee attack against an infantry or bike unit, and modified hit roll of 6 automatically wound the target. This has the specific that it's one of the few exceptions that are available, that you can select this tactic if you have already selected the Whirlwind of Rage tactic. Anyway, this is quite interesting, but it's up to you decide if it works, because it applies only if you are able to make a 6 on hit and to be modified, so you have to have really quite a lot of attacks to be sure that you can have quite an interesting result, but still can be useful. And then we have fearsome aspect that makes that the unit with this static has the ability that it's an aura, so a range, that while the enemy unit is within 3 inches of this unit, you make them subtract 1 from the leadership characteristic of the models in the enemy unit. So if you are able to make improving even more, you can make that if you are able to make that enemy unit to take a moral test, to make sure that you are able to make them fail the moral test. So it can be useful. Maybe not one of my favorite, but useful. And then we have something similar to a part of the Blood Angels one that make you add 1 to the advance and charge rolls made for units with this tactic, so it can be useful anyway. Then we have Indomitable, that is that each time a combat attrition test is taken for a unit with this tactic is automatically passed, and it's similar to the part about the Grim Serve of the Dark Angels that we have seen previously. And then there is the Inheritors of the Primarch, that at the end it's a way to use the chapter tactics of the main chapters without using the main chapters, because maybe you want to have a different scheme of colors or so on. You can have your background and so on, but still being associated to those ones. So it's something that it's a way to personalize your army, still maintaining those main chapter tactics. Then we have Knowledge is Power, that make that each time a psychic test or deny the witch is taken from a psychic unit with this tactic, you can reroll any dice result of 1. So can be quite interesting if you are pointing on having a psychic chapter. so quite good. And then one of my favorite successor chapter tactics, that is long range marksman, that let you add 3 to the range characteristic of rapid fire and heavy weapons, but excluding the flame weapons. So remember that the flames are not suitable for such. And I think that this is really a good chapter tactics to have an increase in range and change the results that you can think about certain weapons, so quite interesting. And then we have Masters Artisans that make that each time a unit with this static is selected to shoot or fight, you can reroll one hit roll when resolving the unit's attacks. And this is quite similar to the one from the Salamander, that it was in that case about the wound roll, this case it's about the hit roll. And then we have preferred enemy, that it's quite similar in alternative way to what we have seen for the Death Watch, and make that when you select this static you have to select one of the following keyword faction, so Chaos Knight, T-Knights, Eldari, Orcs, Heretic, Astartes, Necron and Tau Empire, and each time a model with this static makes a melee attack against a unit with that faction keyword, reroll the hit roll of 1. Okay, it can be useful, but only in melee. It's quite suitable if you are going always against the same type of army, the same type of enemy, but sincerely it's quite limited too, so you can choose, but pay attention about. And then we have Rapid Assault, that makes that the models with this tactic does not suffer penalty incurred to their hit rolls for firing assault weapons in the same turn their unit advance. Yes, it's quite similar to the White Scar one. And then we have Shions of Forge, that it's similar to part of the Iron Hands chapter tactics. In fact, models with this tactic whose characteristic can change as they suffer damage are considered to have double the number of wound characteristics remaining for the purpose of determining whose characteristic they have. So it's part of the Iron Hand chapter tactics. And then we have Stalwart, that is another one of my favorite ones, that make that each time an attack is made against a unit with this tactic, and a modified wound roll of 1 or 2 always fail, irrespective of any abilities or weapon or the attacker may have. And I find it quite amazing, because it means that a third of the result of the dice are lost. Really quite interesting about this. Remember that the wound roll of 1, a modified 1, is always fail, but add also the 2, I think that it's really quite good to remember that you have such options. And then we have Stealthy, that we have seen this in part of the chapter tactics for the Raven Guard. In fact, each time a ranged attack is made against a unit with this tactic, if the attacker is more than 18 inches away, that unit with this tactic is treated like having the benefit of leg cover against that attack. Remember that this works even if you are in open field, so quite interesting anyway, even if 18 inch it's not so few, not so much. And then we have Stoic, that it's part of what we've seen about the Ultramarine. In fact, it lets you add 1 to the leadership characteristic of models with this tactic. And then we had Tactical Retrieval, that make that units with this tactic are eligible to declare a charge with even if they fell back this turn. And it's perfect to combine, for example, with Born Heroes, that makes you gain bonuses if you make a charge, so can be quite interesting. Moreover, remember that it combines perfectly with the Shock Assault combination of the rules for the Space Marines. And then something that comes from the Black Templars. In fact, we had that each time a model with this static will lose a wound as a result of a mortal wound, on F5+, that wound is not lost. And then we have Whirlwind of Rage, that let each time a model with this tactic make a melee attack, if that model unit made a charge move, was charged or performed an heroic intervention this turn, a modified hit roll of 6 score an additional hit. Remember that you have also Shock Assault, so you have an additional attack that you can gain, so you can have even more attacks that makes such option. Remember that anyway, this tactic, as we said before, it's not combinable with duelist tactic. So this is the exception about combining the different chapter tactics. So you only need to choose which one of the main chapter or combination of the successor chapter tactics are of your liking and you want to try. Eventually you can try more and more of them, because you can make a lot of testing and so on. It's up to you. Anyway, I think that you can personalize quite a lot your way to play using such tactics. So,
from Dynamod, it's everything. I invite you to put a like on this video, to subscribe to the channel, to ring the bell, and to comment this video if you are interested in something about this video or you want to suggest me some arguments for other videos. I hope to see you again to the next time.